Okay. Lecture number 8, the last in a series for this whole semester. Um, can't believe this is over already. These 8-week classes go so quickly, and we have covered an incredible amount of ground. So this final lecture is going to be fairly short and easy. I've got some parting thoughts on the course in general. But then we'll go over quickly. We'll go over the final chapter of Langer. No more bourgeois homework. Um, that was a great text, though, to set a good foundation in overall information systems knowledge. But this week we're going over chapter 12, which kind of is a summary of somewhat of Langer's thoughts on organizational learning, particularly focusing on leadership and best practices being enacted in a methodical way at various levels of leadership. Um, but before we get going there, I want to kind of wrap up this whole concept of operational excellence and what we learned from these two texts in our discussions and assignments. Um, Operating with excellence. Um, is all about established procedures and, as Langer says here in chapter 12, best practices. So, regardless of what you're doing, the you'll find there are best practices and maturity models and particular frameworks that help ensure success. Not every idea or tool can guarantee success, but using these tried and true methods generally can advance the maturity of your organization. So, for me, that goes back to the late 1980s when we had uh, an assessment done of a software organization I worked in. We were doing Oracle database development, but there's not a lot of process involved, not a lot of um, um, repeatable, documented, mature software development processes. It was kind of like every programmer was sort of in charge of what they were doing and left to their own decisions on how to manage code configuration and documentation and everything. And we didn't do very well. We were, I think, level 0, hero level, in the Carnegie Mellon Software Engineering Institute Capability Maturity Model assessment. So that was my introduction to maturity models and best practices and all of that. And I've seen uh, or at least my view of that world has grown incredibly. And now you've got standard industry practices in virtually every discipline. There's always something new coming along that requires work in order to standardize it. But you've got best practices now in project management professional body of knowledge. You've got knowledge management certifications and knowledge management approaches. Certainly higher education. That I don't even count that, but software engineering maturity models and continuous process improvement, where you've got like total quality management and ISO 9001. And, these things all have something similar, a similar framework. They're iterative in that you're never done. You're always cycling through sort of the plan, do, check, act, plan, conduct, assess, that circular motion, um, to eventually to make sure that you're feeding back and you are constantly doing self-evaluation as an organization. To me, those are the common threads of what we're seeing. And um, Langer mentioned some of that in chapter 12, toward best practices. And then, for those of you that are in an operational role, you probably heard of ITIL, information technology, infrastructure library. It's best practices. There's many others out there. The software development methodologies, DevOps and Agile and waterfall and software engineering processes. Beg your pardon. There are just so many out there. So that's what I wanted to pass on is this concept of organizational learning and organizational development and operational excellence is all about a constant um, examination of how you're doing business and how you can do it better. And particular to this course was how technology can be integrated into processes or taken out of, replaced with new technology. But what's the impact? Another parting thought, Langer's responsive organizational dynamism. I had never heard of that before, and I did some searching on Google Scholar, and I don't think you're going to hear about it outside of Langer himself. He's trying to create a concept, but I wouldn't worry too much about being conversant on that particular term, although the underlying concepts, how organizations adapt to technological churn and disruptive technologies, that is important. Um, and then the final summary point I wanted to make was that you'll notice, especially this week, but throughout this course, we're looking at leadership. You all might not be in particular areas of leadership right now, coming right out of your undergraduate education and entering into a master's degree. And if you are in a leadership position, tends to be a couple of small numbers of subordinates, but you should always be looking at leadership all the way to the top, from political leadership, presidency and Congress, down through corporate CEOs and leadership, and down through the ranks, through middle management, to your own supervisor. You should always be watching and learning from leadership. Some of the examples will be great, and you'll see the success from their decisions in the organization's improvement. And then you'll see some leadership where you will learn not to do it that way. You'll use that as a lesson of how not to do it. But you should always be looking at leadership, particularly in your chosen career field, information technology. You should be looking at information technology leaders. And whenever you get the chance, if they put out regular communication to the organization, make sure you're reading that. It may seem like it's stuff for the boss or whatever, but make sure you're putting yourself in that person's position as much as you can, because you probably are. You're pursuing your education. You probably aren't the type of person who desires to sit in a cubicle and never have influence over anything. Most of you probably desire to take on leadership positions. So the best way to learn about that is to observe them in action, and then read outside material on leadership and case studies and whatnot, like we have here with our fictitious Revell Corporation, and some of the case studies sidebars that Bourgeois put in his text were really good case studies to learn from. So that's my wrap up of the course. So we've just got two really easy assignments here, wrapping things up. As I posted in the instructions and in the announcements, this is the final week of class. I have to post final grades on Friday. So absolutely everything you do, I'll turn off the classroom Thursday night. So you don't plan on turning anything in late and then asking me to grade it or whatever like that. The semester's ending this week. Um, uh, but I'm recording this lecture and opening up the week 8 folder on Saturday. So hopefully you'll get in there early. We just have a quick discussion and a fairly easy assessment of one chapter of Langer, which I'll talk about here. Make sure you're reading it, but um, Langer's going towards best practices, but this chapter really does focus on the best practices at the leadership level, whether that's the chief information technology officer or the chief executive officer, or even um, middle managers. So yeah, uh, best practices as adopted by leaders, but then even workers, there are particular methods for doing things that are mature. Um, Langer goes into a discussion of the chief IT executive, because it's being called by different names. Now, Langer defines things in the book, so read his, but it's similar to my observation, which is that the CIO tends to overlook the infrastructure, the enterprise, the different networks and applications and licensing and software licenses and whatnot, support agreements, what to outsource, what to insource, all of those sorts of things. That's the corporate level CIO. But then you'll see, as we talked about in the Siemens case, you'll see departmental level CIOs that are less worried about infrastructure and standard services than they are serving their particular business unit's needs and making sure that those information systems are integrated strategically with the objectives of that business unit. So yeah, that's what CIOs are. They're really more about setting the environment, so that the organization is compliant with the law, and operating as um, efficiently as possible. Most companies, IT is a cost center. It doesn't make the company money unless you're, an Apple or a Google or a service provider. But for most companies, like I don't know, maybe like Ford Motor Company or Walmart, um, the information technology department is really a service provider within the company. So it has to justify its existence by efficiencies and being part of the bottom line. But then you've got the CTO. You'll see chief technology officers. I'm seeing them more in like software development organizations or technology development organizations, where they're driving the company towards efficient use of technologies to make a product, not to provide a service internally to the company. That may still have a CIO. You probably still have a CIO inside of a Blackboard, where he's uh, uh, managing the development environment, managing the service provision environment. But then you probably got a CTO that's making sure that new technologies in education software are being incorporated, new web technologies, new development technologies, those sorts of things. So it's kind of an infrastructure versus technology leadership sort of role. Chief knowledge officer, that's another one. I've seen chief data officers. I think Langer also uses chief digital officer, and that's really more about using the the data slash information slash knowledge wisdom held by your organization more efficiently and spreading it. That position actually intrigues me more than the other ones. But anyway, so yeah, Langer goes into these particular roles. And these best practices, of course, these are tried and true. None of those should be surprising to you, of what the
whatever the chief IT officer is called, that person should be focusing on these particular core skills. And then maturity. Maturity is where you move, and this is kind of my definition, and it sort of tracks with Langer's, where you move from reacting to being proactive, and having things established versus being ad hoc or off the cuff or something, processes that are made up in the nick of time to deal with some situation. So Langer describes these maturity stages and performance dimensions. So one is like a stage of development where you go from basically being a student to being a leader, from student to teacher, are basically the maturity stages. And then performance dimensions are how you look at those stages and gauge your progress through that stage and into the next one. So CEOs are getting smarter. So CIOs have to be more business savvy. As the CEO gets smarter on technology, the CIO has to get smarter on business processes. And that's mostly what this chart is about, and what that relationship is like. Okay, now this is what you're going to be doing your Langer homework on. Make sure you're using the CEO technology arc, which is page 313 to page 316. So you'll be describing these in a one pager. Okay, so that's your. And then middle management. Langer goes into this, which is much tougher to define. When he's talking about this, the chief IT officer and the chief executive officer, there are fairly standard roles. But middle management, there's so many different types of middle managers. There's drivers and supporters, of course, within the company. But these are the best practices. With middle management, all middle management should know a little bit about IT so that they can help advocate for their needs with the information technology department. But there's also a business side of things. They've got to be able to tell management how their team is doing, what can be improved. They've got to have input into the strategy development, and they've got to be good, of course, good managers. That's what they're being paid for. So there's some other uh, skills and best practices for middle managers here. But main thing is that they're leaders. They're leading. They're not waiting to be told and just executing orders. All of these leaders are looking forward and leaning forward, and creating change to adapt to the situation. That's the common theme that you'll see all along all of this. Leaders don't sit back and wait, and just follow orders. They lean forward and drive change. And here's maturity stages and performance dimensions for middle management. Still looks a lot like the other ones, only at a lower layer of execution. Is the only real difference you'll see here, as opposed to instead of making a technology strategic decision, they execute that strategy, for example. And then, we as we've read a lot, there are huge ethical issues with information systems, whether it's your own access as an IT professional. Your own access can cause ethical dilemmas, whether it's being transparent with the data that you have. We've all heard about faking data. The Takata airbag case, and um, trouble people have gotten into, financial trouble. There's the ethics of medical records. We've talked about this, but mostly it's about eh, the information system has so much information in it that it's most of the ethics that you're looking at are about protecting it, protecting people's privacy, their confidentiality, but also the integrity of the information. Um, that it's accurate. Like if you're, a credit reporting agency, you have an ethical responsibility to make sure that you're not ruining someone's credit history because they paid a bill off 6 months ago and you're still reporting as a debt. That sort of thing. There's lots of ethics involved in information systems that you guys will all see and be part of. Okay, so your discussions this week are pretty straightforward. I've already opened up this discussion. Um, so we're wrapping up. Okay. We learned a lot about operational excellence across the gamut, from the particular technologies that can enable the way you adapt to those technologies, the way leadership reacts and fosters, the way organizational culture plays into operational excellence and adopting new technology. So we covered a whole lot of material this semester. But for this final, so just what in your professional observation, when you've been at work, what have you seen that contributes to a culture of operational excellence? And this could be anything. And again, don't go get something on the internet and post it on here. This is your thoughts. Um, uh, have you seen leadership? Have you seen middle management, upper management? Have you seen the workers themselves contributing to operational excellence? Is it a particular person, a particular technology? What factors have you seen that contribute to an organization that is truly excellent, that excels at what they're doing? And remember, this is week 8, so your discussion, get your initial post in there as early as you can, and your replies and everything have to be done absolutely no later than Thursday night, where I need to shut the classroom off, and then I'll post grades on Friday. Okay, so that's your discussion, and then like I said, we've got Langer. You'll go over the CEO technology arc, best practices, and the maturity stages and performance dimensions, and just summarize the five those 5 things. There's 5 in each category. Okay, that should be a page, a little more maybe, in APA format. Still saw some papers where people are plugging in URLs, not APA format, and I'm like, come on, guys, you're in a master's degree program. APA format's not that tough to comply with. So let's do a little better with that. But as always, I'm on email. This is not, there's, any time to ask me to go back and look at previous assignments as you look at your grades. And again, I'm looking at originality. I'm still seeing people copying work. So you don't want to get a 0 towards the end here, get in trouble. Anyway, all right. I'm on email if you have any questions or comments, concerns. It's been a very interesting semester. I thought these 2 textbooks were very interesting, and it took me back to some of the jobs I've had running IT organizations. Ran a testing laboratory and a web development shop and a network control center. And a lot of these factors of operational excellence um, seemed familiar. Some we did well, some we didn't. Could have learned, could have used this information back then when I was younger. Okay, there you go. Well, it's been a great class, guys. Everybody take care and have a good summer. And hopefully, by the time you're not too far into your next semester, we'll have eased these COVID-19 factors, and everybody will be back to somewhat of a normal life. Signing off.